Hey everyone, this is Metalhead Nation 1021, and today I'm going to be doing a review of the Scaphism 4-way split from 2017 from the label New Standard Elite, featuring Delusional Parasitosis, Ecchymosis, Dissevered, and Bleeding. I picked this up. They finally made physical copies of this album in February of 2018, if I'm not mistaken, and I decided to pick it up because I love Delusional Parasitosis. It was the only band I knew about before I got this release. And I kind of learned about them around January, maybe February or March of this year. Ran across one of their albums somehow and fell in love with the band. Looked a little more into their history and what they're doing now. The album I heard was Ingesting Intestinal Rot, if I'm not mistaken. And I decided to pick this album up because I love the sound of that original album. I just got into them, and the CD came out just in time, and there are still copies of it, and I think they're making more soon, but I think it's sold out at the moment. Anyways, I've had this album for a while. I've never really sat down and listened to it. I decided I'd do that recently, and I did, and now I just want to do a review of this album. And I'm going to start by just giving some information about the album. So, as I said earlier, this is the Scaphism 4-way split between Delusional Parasitosis, Ecchymosis, Dissevered, and Bleeding. 13 tracks total. Delusional is the only band that has 4. The rest of them have 3 tracks. Of course, it's like brutal death metal, slam, that kind of stuff, with that, I call it like the pingy snare subgenre of it. I've looked at a lot of talk on this album, and people have been calling this album the most brutal release ever, and the most brutal combination of bands ever. And I'm really into gore grind, and slam and brutal death metal and stuff like that. That's some of my favorite music, but like, this album is on a whole other level when it comes to slam. Most slam is really like well or sometimes overproduced and really clean. This right here is raw. It's completely raw. The album cover, you can see it's brutal. Scaphism, if you didn't know, was a medieval torture or actually execution method that involved setting somebody in a boat or barrel, and I'm not going to get into it actually, just look it up, and it's really brutal. But this album cover really does make a good representation of what a victim of this would look like after a while. The CD itself is awesome. You get the CD inside, there's a booklet, and it has a picture of every single band, and a little talk and like list of members in it. Interestingly enough, though, under the band Bleeding, which is the last band on the album, there's just no information on the band members, and no picture either. There's like a picture of 4 people, it seems, but their faces are really distorted, so you can't see anything. And I thought that was interesting. There's not really much more to say about the album layout itself, so I'm going to get into the review of the songs now, the review of the album itself. The first band on here is Delusional Parasitosis with their 4 tracks. You can really classify Delusional Parasitosis as a brutal death metal band with blistering fast drums, super guttural vocals, and awesome riffs. So on this album, or on their side of the split, they have 4 songs. The only one that was released before the album was, the only single from it, is the first song, Controlled by Psychotic Impulse, if I'm not mistaken. And that song, you can kind of hear a new side to Delusional Parasitosis that you haven't heard before. Their album from 2014 was had a very distinct sound, and so does this. You can still tell it's Delusional Parasitosis, but there's little tweaks here and there that they've done, and one of them is that the vocals, in my opinion, sound way more raw, and the whole mix itself sounds really raw. I love what they've done on here. Great part of the split. Alex is blasting away on the drums. The bass is faster than ever. It's amazing. The vocals, I think the guy's name is James. Insane. He has what I've heard called like predator vocals or something like that. You can hear it on the first song again, Controlled by Staccatic Impulse. There's this one moment right after they go in, right before they go into like a really grindy section of the song, and it's basically you just hear like this like gurgle almost, and it's really interesting the vocal techniques that he's using here. Awesome side of the split, and this was the reason that I got the split, and I'm not disappointed at all. The next band on here is a band called Ecchymosis. They're from Thailand, I think, but don't quote me on that. All these bands, I would like to add, have a similar style of that, like, really raw, brutal death metal, like, as heavy as you can get. And Ecchymosis, they released an album in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. Amazing album. It's like 23 minutes. It like leaves you wanting more. And they have 3 songs on the split, and I don't want to say they're too much of an improvement from the album. The album was amazing, so that's not insulting these songs at all. These are great songs. But it's kind of continuing for me that sound that the album had. But again, I hear more of a raw production style, and I really do like that. I really like their style. Like, their vocals, I wouldn't say are as heavy as Delusional Parasitosis, but the snare on Ecchymosis' part of the split, I think of it as an open snare. Like, you don't have anything on the bottom. It's just like a crinkle. That's the sound I think of when I hear the snare. It's awesome. Their drummer is amazing. I'll say one thing, the drummers on all of these bands are, like, they hit it out of the park. Great drumming. With Ecchymosis' side, there's the riffs. There's a lot of, like, I should have talked about the riffs for Delusional Parasitosis. Absolutely amazing, and the slams are awesome. With Ecchymosis as well, there's a lot of pinch harmonics. There's a lot of pretty technical riffs, and I think that really adds to their songs and the style that they play. So yeah, Ecchymosis' side was awesome. I think the most unique part was the drum sound for the snare. It was like an open snare, brutal, and it was awesome. All 3 of their songs were amazing. The next band on the split was Dissevered, and I kind of find them to be a mix between Delusional Parasitosis and Ecchymosis, in the fact that they follow more of a style of the production of Delusional Parasitosis on the split, but I hear a lot of like the song patterns and song ideas shared between Ecchymosis and Dissevered. I really do. They released an album a while ago as well. I'm pretty sure 2016. Don't quote me on that again. But again, they have 3 songs, and I really hear that that production style that Delusional had, but more of a chaotic song structure like what Ecchymosis was doing on the split. And the one thing that's really unique about this band are the vocals. Ecchymosis kind of had a little bit higher vocals, and Delusional had the insane, like, gurgles. And this is, like, just a low guttural sound. It's not really weird noises. It's, like, super deep guttural vocals with nothing extra added much. There are certain parts where it is, but I really did enjoy their side. Their snare was a little more like Delusional's, and I really do enjoy the songs are about 2.5 to 3 minutes, so nothing too long. They live as long as they need to. They stay as long as they need to, and then they get out and they leave you wanting more again. Great part of the split. All the songs were great, and I can't really say any more about Dissevered that hasn't already been said. An awesome band, and their side of the split, again, as well as the other bands I've talked about, is just amazing. And just for the price, the price is worth it alone just to hear one band on the split. I mean, it's worth it in any way. The final band on the split, and probably the least familiar you might be with, they're called Bleeding. And I'm not sure where they're from. I don't know any of the members, but I do know they, again, had 3 songs on the split. And what's really unique about Dissevered is their production. While the other bands all had little differences in production, while it was all kind of similar, the guitars on here are extremely raw and very, very, I don't know how to say it, really crackly, or if that's probably the best way I can put it. It's really crackly, and while all these other bands really had kind of that like chaotic live drummer type sound, like more of a gore grind type drum sound, thinking like Last Days of Humanity and stuff like that, this seems a little more controlled. It's still extremely raw in sound, but in performance it's a little more controlled and less chaotic, which I don't mind at all. It's kind of has a little like difference between the rest of the album. It varies a bit, which is nice. And but again, like the guitars on here are awesome. But the main thing that I hear when I listen to Bleeding's part of the split are the vocals. They're very unique. Every vocalist on here has a unique style. And with Bleeding, it's basically like gore grind, almost gurgles and stuff like that. Not pitch shifted at all, if I'm not mistaken. It's just gurgles, like from the bottom of the throat of the vocalist. And they're insane, they're awesome, and they really complement the musicianship on this part of the split. There's not much more I can say about Bleeding. I don't think they've had any other albums out. The rest of these bands have. Go check them out. And I just want to say about New Standard Elite, the people who released this, amazing, amazing work on this, getting these 4 bands together and putting together the split. Probably one of the best purchases I've made in a very long time. I cannot thank you enough, and please keep putting out music and adding new bands. New Standard Elite, you guys are awesome, and just keep up the great work. I'm going to end the review with talking about like the score I'm going to give it. Okay, let's go back over this again. 13 tracks, about 40 minutes long, of pure hyper-blasting brutality, as the New Standard Elite puts it. And if there's one thing to take away from this album, is that there's always room for improvement. Every band on here, in my opinion, improved from their past material. And if I had to pick a favorite side off the split, it'd probably be Delusional, just because insane drums, just insane vocals. I feel like they took the sound they already established and they ran with it, and it sounded amazing. Every band did amazing and just super great on here, though. There's no complaints about this album at all, and that's why I'm going to give it a 10 out of 10. This is probably one of my favorite pieces of music ever put out, in the not just in the brutal death metal scene, in the death metal scene in general, and in music in general so far. I love this album. Definitely worth any price. And if you can get a hold of the physical copy, it's worth it just to say that you own it. Awesome, awesome album. Awesome, awesome split. Check out all the bands. Check out New Standard Elite. Thank you for watching the review. This is a 10 out of 10. This is Metalhead Nation 1021, and I'm going to sign off now. Thanks for watching.